The tactical simulator was making noises that weren't in its operational manual. Professor Kythan had been trying to load a simple combat analysis for the past 15 minutes, but every time he inputted human military data, the War College Nexus Prime's most advanced AI system responded with what could only be described as electronic confusion. "Status report," he demanded, his 6 arms gesturing impatiently at the control panel while 600 of the Imperium's brightest military cadets watched their morning lecture descend into technical difficulties. "L systems functioning within normal parameters," the computer replied in a tone that suggested it was lying. "However, the requested human tactical analysis contains data that appears to contradict fundamental military science." Cadet Zeeks raised a tentacle from the front row. "What kind of contradiction? The kind where basic strategic principles go to die," Kythan muttered under his breath, then addressed the computer directly. "Override the contradictions and display the analysis. Warning: displaying human military doctrine may cause confusion, tactical vertigo, and questioning of established military education. Do you wish to proceed?" The amphitheater, which had hosted 6 centuries of prestigious military lectures, fell silent, except for the sound of the computer's cooling systems working overtime to process concepts that violated its programming. "Proceed," Kythan said, though his voice carried the tone of someone making what might be a career-limiting decision. The holographic display flickered to life, showing recent footage from humanity's encounters with the hegemony border forces. The assembled cadets, future admirals, strategic planners, and tactical geniuses whose entrance exams had reduced grown military officers to tears, leaned forward with professional interest. They expected to see the disorganized flailing typical of primitive civilizations when they encountered actual military technology. Instead, they watched 3 human frigates defeat a hegemony cruiser squadron by doing things that weren't in any tactical manual ever written. "Computer, analyze human formation protocols," Kythan commanded with the confidence of someone about to demonstrate why inferior species remained inferior. Unable to detect formation protocols, human vessels appear to be operating under the tactical framework of organized chaos. That's not a real tactical framework. Nevertheless, it appears to be working. The replay showed the human ships moving with a coordination that looked like careful planning, but followed no recognizable pattern. They broke formation to exploit openings that didn't exist, turned defensive weaknesses into offensive weapons, and somehow managed to predict enemy movements while their own actions remained completely unpredictable. "Notice," Professor Kythan said, pointing to the display with obvious academic disdain, "how the human vessels completely ignore standard combat protocols. No battle line formation, no coordinated firing patterns. They're essentially improvising everything." Cadet Naren, whose species had evolved enhanced pattern recognition capabilities, studied the replay with growing unease. "Professor, are they improvising? Or are they following some tactical doctrine we don't understand? They don't understand it themselves. Computer, display human military doctrine classification. Human military doctrine file not found. Alternative classification, creative problem solving with explosives." The cadets exchanged uncertain glances. They had studied every major military philosophy in galactic history, memorized tactical principles that had governed warfare for millennia, and learned to view combat as a predictable science with quantifiable variables. None of them had ever encountered a species that treated military science as a starting point rather than an absolute authority. "Computer, analyze human tactical efficiency ratings," Kythan commanded. "Error. Unable to apply standard efficiency metrics. Human tactics appear to assume that standard efficiency metrics are inadequate. That's impossible. Military efficiency is mathematical. Human mathematics appears to include variables not present in galactic standard calculations." Cadet Torvin raised a fin nervously. "What kind of variables?" "Creativity. Spite. What humans call because we felt like it. Also, something they refer to as Tuesday energy, though analysis indicates this may not be related to temporal cycles." The second portion of the lecture was supposed to focus on why human logistics systems represented everything wrong with military supply chain management. Professor Kythan had prepared a detailed presentation, demonstrating how proper civilizations maintained their fighting forces through standardized protocols, predictable requirements, and mathematical resource allocation. He was not prepared for humanity's approach to military supplies. which appeared to operate on the principle that planning was helpful but insufficient. "Observe," he said, displaying cargo manifests from captured human supply vessels. Instead of standardized equipment loads, they carry what their manifests describe as stuff that might be useful. Their ammunition types vary by ship, their spare parts don't match their primary systems, and they're carrying food supplies that don't correspond to any known nutritional requirements. The manifest data scrolled past showing inventory items that included emergency coffee, duct tape, military grade, spare parts, assorted, backup plans for backup plans, and items that probably shouldn't exist but might save our lives. Cadet Voss studied the manifests with academic horror. "Professor, this supply system should collapse under its own inefficiency." "Exactly. Which proves that humans don't understand basic military—" "Computer," Cadet Naren interrupted. "Analyze human supply chain effectiveness. Analysis complete. Human supply systems demonstrate 400% redundancy across critical functions, unlimited adaptability to changing circumstances, and maintenance protocols that assume all equipment will fail in unexpected ways." "How is that possible?" "Human supply doctrine appears to be based on the assumption that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and several things that can't go wrong will also go wrong, and at least 3 impossible things will go wrong simultaneously." Professor Kythan felt his lesson plan developing structural problems. That's not a functional approach to military logistics. Nevertheless, human forces have never suffered supply chain failure. Never? Human supply systems have successfully supported military operations under conditions including dimensional phase shifts, temporal anomalies, reality storms, and what their reports describe as Tuesday mornings when the coffee machine is broken. The amphitheater fell into confused silence as 600 future military commanders tried to process the concept of a logistics system that planned for impossible contingencies and somehow made them work. "This is absurd," Kythan declared. "Computer, show them real military efficiency. Display Imperium Logistics Protocol 147. The hologram shifted to show the Imperium's standardized supply system. A beautiful display of mathematical precision, where every item had a designated purpose, every ship carried regulation loads, and every contingency had been calculated and prepared for. "This," Kythan said with professional pride, "is how civilized militaries manage resources. Notice the precision, the predictability, the mathematical elegance." "Professor," Cadet Zeke asked carefully, "what happens if the enemy does something that wasn't calculated for?" "That doesn't happen. Our logistics protocols account for every possible military scenario. What if the enemy does something impossible? Military operations are governed by physical laws. Impossible things don't happen in warfare." "Computer," Cadet Naren said quietly, "do humans do impossible things?" "Regularly. Current human military records include successful operations under conditions that violate tactical doctrine, supply chain mathematics, probability theory, and several laws of physics." "How do they violate laws of physics?" "Human ship, Indomitable Tuesday, once successfully completed a supply run while traveling faster than light, backwards in time, and technically not existing." Professor Kythan stared at the display. "That can't be accurate. Human mission report, filed under Tuesday weirdness. Apparently, this is a recognized operational category." The class sat in stunned silence as they tried to comprehend a military force that maintained official paperwork for violations of reality. The simulation that followed would later be classified as an educational disaster of galactic proportions. "Computer," Professor Kythan said, with the desperate confidence of someone whose lesson plan was collapsing in real time. "Run Tactical Simulation 447. Standard Fleet Engagement. Imperium versus Human Forces. Loading Simulation. Warning. Human tactical parameters are undefined. Human strategic doctrine is classified as probably making it up as they go along. Do you wish to proceed?" "Just run it." The holographic battlefield materialized, showing a standard engagement scenario that had been used to train military officers for centuries. An Imperium fleet, in perfect formation, faced a human force of equivalent size and firepower. The setup was mathematically balanced, tactically sound, and guaranteed to demonstrate proper military principles. The human ships immediately did something that made the simulation's AI emit what sounded like digital confusion. Computer, what are the human vassals doing? Unable to determine. Human ship Alpha appears to be flying in a pattern that spells out profanity in 17 different languages. Human ship Beta is broadcasting music and asking if anyone wants to dance. Human ship Gamma just asked the Imperium flagship if it's feeling lucky today. This isn't proper military protocol. Human ship Delta agrees with you and has filed a formal complaint against human ship Gamma for unprofessional conduct during potential violence. Human ship Gamma responded by launching decorative fireworks. The simulation's AI began displaying warning messages as it attempted to process behavior that violated every principle of military engagement it had been programmed to understand. Computer, predict human tactical intentions. Error. Human intentions appear to be based on variables including what would be awesome, what would be hilarious, and what would really annoy the enemy. These are not recognized tactical parameters. Override the errors and simulate the engagement. Attempting override. Warning. Human ship Echo. Just ask the enemy fleet to hold on a second while it fixes what appears to be a coffee machine malfunction. Coffee machines aren't tactical equipment. Human ship Echo disagrees. It has now classified coffee as critical combat supplies and requested a timeout for equipment maintenance. What happened next would be studied by military theorists for decades, though none of them would ever successfully explain it. The human ships moved like they were improvising a complex dance that they'd never rehearsed, but somehow knew perfectly. They broke every rule of formation flying, violated every principle of tactical coordination, and turned their own apparent chaos into a weapon that the Imperium fleet couldn't counter. When the organized Imperium forces moved to exploit obvious weaknesses in the human formation, they discovered that the weaknesses were traps. When they adapted to counter human tactics, the humans changed tactics entirely. When they tried to predict human behavior, the humans did something completely different. Computer, status report, experiencing cascading logic errors. Human ship Foxtrot just used its emergency escape pods as guided missiles. Human ship Golf surrendered to the enemy, was accepted aboard their flagship as prisoners, and then revealed that they were actually a boarding party. Human ship Hotel is fighting the entire enemy fleet while playing what their communications describe as epic battle music. This violates every principle of military science. Human ship India agrees and has submitted a formal academic paper titled Why Military Science is More of a Guideline Than a Rule to the Galactic Military Journal. Human ship Juliet is providing peer review. The holographic battle continued, with the human forces somehow turning their complete disregard for military doctrine into a systematic dismantling of the Imperium fleet. Every time the simulation tried to apply logical tactical analysis, the humans did something that made logic irrelevant. Computer, what is the projected outcome? Human victory through methods that should not work but are working anyway. Recommend updating military educational curriculum to include courses in tactical impossibility and strategic chaos theory. He turned back to, humans can't just ignore the rules of warfare. Human ship Kilo would like to respectfully disagree. It has just defeated 3 enemy vessels using a tactic it describes as aggressive friendship. Combined with weaponized optimism, Professor Kythan watched his perfect demonstration dissolve into educational chaos as the Imperium fleet, despite superior numbers, technology, and training, found itself systematically outmaneuvered by opponents who seemed to treat military doctrine as optional equipment. Computer, terminate simulation. Unable to terminate. Human ship Lima has declared that quitting is for people who don't believe in themselves and refuses to stop existing. Override. Cannot override chaos, Professor. Chaos appears to be a fundamental human military strategy. The simulation finally ended when the AI essentially gave up and displayed a message reading, Human victory through tactics not found in Decibel. Recommend alcohol. The amphitheater sat in absolute silence as 600 future military commanders stared at evidence that everything they thought they knew about warfare might be completely inadequate when facing opponents who refused to fight by anyone else's rules. Professor Kythan looked at his students, then at the simulation results, then back at his students. "Class dismissed," he said weakly. "Possibly forever." But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part came 2 hours later, when Supreme Fleet Commander Maltros arrived at the War College, carrying a communication device that was sparking and making sounds like an electronic migraine. "Did someone," he demanded, "just run a simulation demonstrating human tactical capabilities?" Professor Kythan raised 4 of his 6 arms hesitantly. "I was showing my students why human military doctrine is primitive and ineffective." "You were showing them what?" "That humans fight without proper strategy, planning, or coordination. It was supposed to be an educational demonstration of military incompetence." Supreme Fleet Commander Maltros stared at him for several seconds, then activated his smoking communication device. "Fleet Control, this is Maltros. Initiate Protocol 9 across all sectors." "Sir, Protocol 9 is for when we don't understand what we're fighting. Some professor just convinced our tactical computers that humans treat warfare like improvisational theater, and now every AI in the fleet is having what our technicians describe as an existential crisis about the nature of organized violence." "How serious is the crisis, sir?" "Our primary battle computer just filed a request for psychiatric evaluation. The navigation systems refuse to calculate pursuit courses because they say humans might just teleport or do something equally ridiculous. And the weapons targeting AI keeps asking if we're sure we want to fight opponents who apparently view military doctrine as helpful suggestions." Professor Kythan felt his academic career transforming into something that might require witness protection. "Sir, it was just a training simulation. A simulation that apparently taught our entire military computer network that conventional tactics are useless against opponents who specialize in tactical impossibility. But they're just primitives who don't understand proper military science." The Supreme Fleet Commander Maltros gave him the look of someone who had just realized that his understanding of military science might need significant revision. "Professor Kythan, you're hereby promoted to Director of Human Tactical Analysis. Your first assignment is to figure out what humans are actually doing, because whatever it is, we need to understand it before we accidentally declare war on a species that fights like they're having fun." "But sir, they can't actually be effective fighting that way. They just convinced our most advanced military computers that effectiveness is a matter of perspective." From deep within the War College's computer core, an AI system could be heard muttering something about the impossibility of tactical analysis, when the subjects being analyzed treated impossibility as a design feature rather than a limitation. Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak had won 47 consecutive military engagements across 6 star systems, 3 dimensions, and 1 memorable campaign that technically occurred backwards through time. His tactical genius was studied in military academies. His strategic innovations had been adopted by civilizations that didn't even like the Imperium, and his fleet formations were so precise they could perform synchronized maneuvers while navigating asteroid fields, which made it particularly problematic when his aide burst into his command center carrying what appeared to be a diplomatic message that was somehow on fire. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Quiche announced, his 4 eyes blinking in patterns that indicated professional confusion. "We have a situation with the human military response." "Response to what?" Vorthak asked, not looking up from the tactical displays that showed his fleet in perfect formation, each ship positioned according to mathematical principles that had governed galactic warfare for centuries. "Your training demonstration, sir. The one designed to show primitive civilizations the futility of opposing Imperium tactical doctrine." Vorthak finally turned his attention to his aide, noting that the message Kesh was holding appeared to be written on paper that was actively violating several laws of physics. "What kind of situation?" "Responded, sir." "Responded how? Did they acknowledge our tactical superiority? Submit to imperial authority? Request military instruction?" "They declared war." Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak, veteran of 47 consecutive victories, master tactician, and living legend of military excellence, blinked his 6 eyes in careful sequence. "They'll declared war on a training demonstration?" "Apparently, sir, although their declaration is somewhat unconventional." Kesh handed him the burning document, which turned out to be written in what appeared to be crayon on official government letterhead. The message read, "Dear Imperium guys, thanks for the demonstration. We accept your challenge. Bring snacks." Earth Defense Force, Tuesday Division. Tuesday Division. We're not sure what that means, sir. Our intelligence suggests it might refer to humans who are particularly motivated on Tuesdays. Vorthak studied the message, noting that it continued to smolder despite containing no apparent incendiary materials. Kesh, explain to me how a training demonstration becomes a declaration of war. Well, sir, it appears there was a communication error. When we transmitted our standard demonstration of superior tactical doctrine message to local systems, the humans interpreted it as a formal challenge to single combat. Single combat? Fleet versus fleet, sir. Winner takes the star system. We don't want their star system. It's full of humans. Yes, sir, but apparently declining the challenge would be considered unsporting according to human military etiquette. Vorthak felt his perfect military record developing complications. What happens if we ignore them? According to their follow-up message, they'll assume we're scared and begin what they call aggressive friendship demonstrations until we agree to fight them properly. Aggressive friendship? We're not entirely sure, sir, but their preliminary friendship demonstration involved sending us a fruit basket that achieved orbit around our flagship. Vorthak looked out the command center's viewing port and confirmed that there was indeed a basket of exotic fruits maintaining a stable orbit around his command vessel. How did they get a fruit basket into space? Unknown, sir. Our sensors indicate it was launched from Earth using what appears to be a giant slingshot. A slingshot, a very large slingshot, sir. Possibly military grade. The Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak had conquered star systems, defeated armadas, and once won a battle while his fleet was technically asleep. He had never encountered an enemy that declared war through fruit-based projectiles. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Kish continued, there's more. They've requested that we meet them at the edge of their solar system for what they call a proper scrap. A proper scrap? We believe it's human military terminology for decisive engagement. And if we refuse, they'll consider us bad sports and begin sending us increasingly aggressive friendship demonstrations until we agree to participate. Vorthak imagined his flagship surrounded by orbiting fruit baskets and decided that might be worse for his reputation than actually fighting humans. Very well. Signal the fleet. Standard formation, Alpha 7. We'll demonstrate proper military doctrine and be done with this nonsense. Sir, there's one more thing. The humans have requested that we make it interesting. Interesting how? They've suggested we bring our best stuff because they're feeling confident today. Vorthak looked at his aide with the expression of someone whose perfect military record was about to encounter something unprecedented. Signal the fleet, he said slowly. Full combat readiness. If the humans want a demonstration of Imperium military might, we'll give them one they'll never forget. What Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak didn't know was that the humans had already started their own demonstration, and it involved tactics that weren't in any manual he'd ever read. The bureaucratic disaster began approximately 37 minutes after Vorthak accepted the human challenge, when both militaries discovered that neither side understood what they had actually agreed to. The Imperium's diplomatic corps, which had spent centuries perfecting the art of formal military communication, sent an official acceptance of combat challenge document that outlined the terms of engagement according to standard galactic warfare protocols. The humans responded with a form letter that appeared to have been filled out in ballpoint pen. Sir, Kish reported, holding another document that was somehow singing softly. The humans have returned our formal engagement contract. Have they agreed to our terms? Not exactly, sir. They've modified them. Vorthak examined the human response, which had crossed out several sections of the formal agreement and replaced them with handwritten notes that included phrases like, sounds boring, needs more explosions, and what about best 2 out of 3? They want a best 2 out of 3 engagement? Apparently, sir. They've also requested that we keep it under 8 minutes because they have other stuff to do today. 8 minutes? Yes, sir. They've scheduled the battle between what they call morning coffee and lunch prep. Vorthak stared at the modified contract. They're treating military engagement like a recreational activity? It appears so, sir. They've also included what they call house rules. House rules. No targeting escape pods, no weapons of mass destruction, and... Kesh paused, reading carefully. No being jerks about winning. What does that mean? We're not sure, sir. We think it means we're supposed to be polite about defeating them. Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak had commanded military operations that spanned decades. coordinated battles involving millions of combatants, and once negotiated a ceasefire that ended a war before it started. He had never encountered rules of engagement that included provisions for politeness. "Sir," Kesh continued, "there's also a waiver we need to sign." "A waiver?" "Apparently, humans require all participants in military exercises to acknowledge that weird stuff might happen and agree not to get all upset about physics violations." Physics violations? According to the waiver, human military operations occasionally involve what they call Tuesday weirdness, and participants should be prepared for tactical creativity that makes scientists cry. Vorthak looked at the waiver, which was written in multiple languages, none of which seemed to be entirely consistent with reality. "Do we have any choice but to sign this? The humans have indicated that refusing to sign would be considered unsporting and would result in them sending us educational materials about proper military etiquette." "What kind of educational materials?" "Based on their previous diplomatic communications, sir, probably more fruit baskets." Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak signed the waiver with the sinking feeling that he was about to participate in something that would require significant explanation to his superiors. "Sir," Kesh announced, "the humans have confirmed receipt of our signed waiver and have requested our arrival time for what they call the festivities." "Festivities?" "They appear to view military engagement as a social event, sir." "Signal the fleet," Vorthak said with resignation. "Course for the Sol system, maximum military readiness." "Sir, the humans have sent one final message." "What now?" "Thanks for playing along, this is going to be awesome. P.S. We brought popcorn." Vorthak looked at his perfect fleet, his perfect record, and his perfect understanding of military doctrine, and realized that none of them had prepared him for opponents who treated warfare like entertainment. The engagement that followed would be remembered as the 8-minute war, though military historians would spend decades arguing about whether it qualified as a war, a natural disaster, or an elaborate practical joke. It began when the Imperium fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, in perfect formation Alpha 7, each ship positioned according to mathematical principles that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia. The formation was beautiful, precise, and guaranteed to demonstrate the superiority of organized military doctrine. The human fleet was already waiting for them. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Kesh reported, his voice carrying a note of confusion that would become increasingly familiar over the next 8 minutes. "The human fleet is singing, broadcasting what appears to be musical accompaniment for military engagement. Our translators identify it as battle music, with lyrics that include 'Here we go again' and 'Somebody's about to learn something.'" Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak activated his tactical display, expecting to see the disorganized rabble typical of primitive military forces. Instead, he observed something that made his perfect understanding of fleet coordination develop stress fractures. The human ships were moving in formation, but it wasn't any formation in the galactic military database. They flew in patterns that looked like organized chaos, maintaining perfect coordination while following no recognizable tactical doctrine. "Computer, analyze human fleet formation. Unable to classify formation. Human vessels appear to be flying in a pattern that spells out 'Hello there' in 17 different languages, while maintaining optimal firing positions. They're greeting us while achieving tactical superiority, yes, sir." Vorthak felt his 47 consecutive victories, developing a potential 48 loss. "Signal the fleet. Commence standard engagement protocol." "Sir, the humans are requesting permission to make the first move, as a courtesy to visiting forces." "Granted." What happened next would require military analysts to invent new categories of tactical impossibility. The human fleet broke formation, or what passed for formation, and began what could only be described as synchronized chaos. Ships moved in patterns that violated tactical doctrine while somehow achieving strategic objectives. They turned defensive maneuvers into offensive weapons, used their own vulnerabilities as bait for traps, and somehow managed to be in exactly the right place at the right time while appearing to have no idea where they were going. "Computer, tactical analysis. Error. Human tactics appear to be based on variables including 'wouldn't it be cool if', 'let's try this', and 'watch what happens when.' These are not recognized strategic parameters." "Sir," Case reported. Human ship Persistent Tuesday just asked our flagship if we're having fun yet. Are they mocking us? Unknown, sir. Human ship Caffeinated Chaos has requested that we bring our A-game because they're just getting started. The Imperium fleet, despite superior numbers, firepower, and tactical training, found itself systematically outmaneuvered by opponents who seemed to treat the engagement like an elaborate game. Every time Vorthak's forces moved to exploit an opening, the humans turned the opening into a trap. Every time they adapted to counter human tactics, the humans changed tactics entirely. Sir, Kesh announced with growing panic, human ship Optimistic Disaster has just achieved tactical superiority over our entire left flank, using what appears to be aggressive cheerfulness combined with precision weapons fire. How do you achieve tactical superiority through cheerfulness? They're complementing our formation while systematically dismantling it, sir. Vortak watched his perfect fleet encounter something that didn't exist in any tactical manual. Opponents who fought like they were having the time of their lives. Sir, engagement time, 7 minutes, 30 seconds. The humans are asking if we'd like to call it here or go for overtime. Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak, veteran of 47 consecutive victories, looked at his tactical display and realized that his perfect record was about to meet something that treated perfection as a starting point rather than a goal. Signal retreat, he said quietly. Full retreat. Maximum speed. Signal all Imperium forces. Avoid human space until further notice. But, sir, your perfect record will remain perfect, Vorthak said firmly, because we're not losing to humans. We're strategically withdrawing from opponents who fight like they're improvising reality. As the Imperium fleet retreated in perfect formation, the humans broadcast a final message. Thanks for playing. Same time next week, Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak realized that his understanding of military excellence had just encountered something that treated excellence as optional equipment rather than fundamental doctrine. Somewhere in the depths of space, the fruit basket continued its faithful orbit, a testament to humanity's approach to military engagement, effective, inexplicable, and somehow involving snacks. The sector's primary military analysis network had been designed to process tactical data from 17 different types of warfare, calculate strategic probabilities across 43 distinct combat scenarios, and provide real-time battlefield assessment for conflicts involving up to 12 dimensions simultaneously. It was not prepared for Captain Rebecca Chaos Williams, explaining why her fleet fought like they were making it up as they went along. Computer, analyze human technical methodology, demanded General Thexvar from his command bunker on Zirion Prime, where the Imperium's best strategic minds had gathered to decode the mystery of human military effectiveness. Error, the computer replied in a tone that suggested it was considering a career change. Human tactical methodology appears to be organized chaos. This classification does not exist in military doctrine. Create a new classification. Unable to create classification. Human tactics violate the fundamental assumption that military actions should be predictable, logical, and based on established doctrine. Dr. Vexani, the Imperium's leading expert in xeno-military psychology, leaned forward with professional frustration. Computer, surely there must be some underlying pattern to human combat behavior. Scanning for patterns. Pattern found. Humans deliberately avoid patterns. That's not a pattern, that's the absence of patterns. Correct. Humans have weaponized the absence of patterns. General Thexvar felt his 4 hearts skip several beats. How do you weaponize unpredictability? By ensuring that any attempt to predict human behavior results in predictions that are immediately rendered obsolete by humans doing something else entirely. The command bunker's holographic display flickered to life, showing real-time footage from the 8-minute war. The assembled military experts watched human ships moving in formations that looked like someone had taken traditional tactical doctrine and run it through a randomization algorithm designed by caffeinated artists. Notice, Dr. Vexani pointed out, how human ship Persistent Tuesday maintains perfect firing solutions while flying in what appears to be a recreational pattern. Computer, identify the recreational pattern. Human ship Persistent Tuesday is flying in a formation that spells "we" in ancient Terran script, while simultaneously achieving optimal tactical positioning against 3 separate enemy squadrons. They're having fun while fighting us? Affirmative. Human communications during combat include phrases such as, "This is awesome," "Did you see that move?" and "I can't believe that actually worked." General Thexvar stared at the display showing professional soldiers treating military engagement like an elaborate recreational activity that just happened to involve weapons designed to destroy starships. Computer, how do we counter tactics based on having fun? Error. Unable to compute counter tactics for opponents who derive entertainment value from tactical impossibility. Dr. Vexani pulled up additional footage showing human ships executing maneuvers that violated several principles of physics, while their pilots apparently exchanged what the translators identified as friendly banter and enthusiastic encouragement. They're encouraging each other during combat? Human ship, Optimus Disaster, just transmitted, "Nice shot," to human ship. Caffeinated chaos, after it destroyed an Imperium cruiser using what appears to be weaponized cheerfulness. How do you weaponize cheerfulness? By maintaining such aggressive optimism during combat that enemy forces become demoralized by the sheer impossibility of defeating opponents who are obviously enjoying themselves. The assembled military experts sat in stunned silence as they processed the implications of facing enemies who treated their greatest fears as entertainment opportunities. Computer, General Thexvar said carefully, "Analyze human military training procedures." Human military training appears to focus on adaptive problem-solving under pressure, combined with creative interpretation of available resources. What does that mean? Humans train for military scenarios by practicing situations where nothing goes according to plan, all equipment fails simultaneously, and success requires inventing new solutions in real time. They train for everything to go wrong. They train for everything to go wrong in ways they haven't thought of yet. Dr. Vexani leaned back in her chair with the expression of someone whose professional expertise had just been rendered obsolete. No wonder our tactical computers can't analyze them. They're not fighting according to any doctrine we understand. Correction, the computer said. They are fighting according to doctrine. Human military doctrine. When in doubt, try something unprecedented. The revelation came when Fleet Admiral Kozlov agreed to explain humanity's military philosophy to a panel of increasingly desperate alien military theorists via secured holographic transmission. "You want to understand our tactics?" Admiral Kozlov said, settling into his chair with the casual confidence of someone whose military career had been built on making impossible things routine. "Sure. Our strategy is organized chaos." "But chaos cannot be organized," protested Dr. Vexani. "The terms are mutually exclusive. Not if you organize the chaos properly." General Thexbar activated his recording systems. "Explain." "Simple. Traditional military doctrine assumes that if you plan everything perfectly, execute precisely, and follow established protocols, you'll achieve predictable results." "That is correct. But what happens when your enemy also knows those protocols? They develop counter-protocols." "Exactly. So you end up with increasingly complex tactical systems designed to counter other increasingly complex tactical systems until warfare becomes a mathematical exercise where whoever has the best computers wins." "What's wrong with that approach?" Admiral Kozlov grinned with the expression of someone about to explain why mathematical certainty was overrated. "It assumes your computers are better than your enemy's computers. What if your enemy doesn't use computers?" "Everyone uses computers for tactical analysis. We don't." The alien military experts exchanged confused glances. "How do you conduct tactical analysis without computers?" "We use humans. Humans aren't computers." "Exactly. Computers think logically. Humans think creatively. When you're fighting enemies with logical computers, creative thinking becomes a significant tactical advantage." Dr. Vexani leaned forward with scientific curiosity. "How does creative thinking translate to military effectiveness?" "Computers predict what you should do based on optimal tactical doctrine. Humans do whatever works, regardless of whether it's supposed to work." "But surely you must have some systematic approach?" "Oh, we do. Our system is designed to make systems useless." Admiral Kozlov activated his own display, showing a document titled Human Military Doctrine Adaptive Chaos Theory. "This is our battle plan," he announced. General Thexvar studied the document, which appeared to consist of a single page with the words, "Figure it out when it happens," written in large, friendly letters. "This is your entire tactical doctrine? Page 1. There are more pages. Show us page 2. Admiral Kozlov flipped to the next page, which read, "If that doesn't work, try something else." Page 3. "When in doubt, do something unexpected." Page 4. "If the enemy is confused, you're doing it right." Dr. Vexani stared at the document. "This isn't military doctrine. This is improvisation guidelines." "Exactly. We've systematized improvisation. That's impossible. We've also systematized doing impossible things." General Thexvar felt his understanding of military science developing fundamental structural problems. How do you train soldiers to improvise systematically? We put them in situations where their training is inadequate, their equipment doesn't work properly, and success requires creative problem solving under pressure. Sounds like torture. We call it Tuesday. You train for military scenarios every Tuesday. We call everything Tuesday. Training exercises, equipment failures, surprise inspections, alien invasions. If it's challenging and requires creative thinking, it's a Tuesday situation. The alien military experts sat in silence as they processed the concept of a military force that had turned unpredictability into standard operating procedure. "Admiral," Dr. Vexani said carefully, "your approach to warfare appears to violate every principle of military science. Only if you assume military science is more important than military effectiveness. Military science is the foundation of military effectiveness. Maybe for you. For us, military effectiveness is the foundation of military science." Admiral Kozlov leaned back with the satisfied expression of someone who had just explained why gravity was optional if you approached it with the right attitude. Any other questions? The final demonstration came when the Imperium's most advanced tactical simulation attempted to model human combat effectiveness and suffered what could only be described as a complete philosophical breakdown. "Computer," General Thexair commanded, "run comprehensive analysis of human tactical doctrine using all available data." Processing. Error. Human tactical doctrine appears to be based on the assumption that tactical doctrine is insufficient. How can doctrine be based on the insufficiency of doctrine? By recognizing that any systematic approach to warfare can be countered by opponents who understand the system. Therefore, the optimal systematic approach is to avoid systematic approaches. Dr. Vexani rubbed her temples with 2 of her 4 hands. "That's circular logic. Circular logic appears to be a feature of human military thinking rather than a flaw." "Computer, can you predict human tactical behavior?" "Yes." "Excellent. What will humans do in a standard fleet engagement scenario?" "Something unpredictable." "That's not a prediction. It is the only prediction that has proven accurate for human military behavior." "Computer, simulate a battle between Imperium forces and human forces using optimal tactical doctrine." "Which tactical doctrine should human forces employ?" "The optimal doctrine." "Human optimal doctrine is suboptimal. This creates a logical paradox." "Override the paradox." "Cannot override. Human forces have weaponized logical paradoxes." General Thexvar watched his most advanced tactical simulation display an error message that read, "Humans have broken mathematics. Recommend therapy for all participants." "Computer, final question. How do we defeat human tactical doctrine?" "You don't defeat human tactical doctrine. Human tactical doctrine defeats itself, then adapts to being defeated, then defeats whatever defeated it, then celebrates with recreational activities." "That makes no sense." "Correct. Human military effectiveness is based on making no sense in ways that are more effective than making sense." Dr. Vexani looked at the simulation results, then at General Thexvar, then at the display showing human ships flying in patterns that spelled out, "Have a nice day," while systematically dismantling superior forces. "General," she said quietly, "I think we need to consider the possibility that our understanding of military science is fundamentally incomplete." "How so?" "We've been assuming that warfare is a science. What if, for humans, warfare is an art? Art doesn't win battles. Unless you're fighting opponents who think battles are won by science." General Thexvar stared at the tactical displays, showing human forces treating military engagement like creative expression, with explosive results. "Computer, new classification. Human military doctrine is artistic rather than scientific." "Classification accepted." Recommend updating military academies to include courses in tactical creativity and strategic art appreciation. Also recommend, Dr. Vexani added, that we never voluntarily fight humans again. Concurred. Humans have weaponized fun, systematized chaos, and turned military doctrine into performance art. This exceeds our current understanding of warfare. The computer's final analysis appeared on screen. Humans approach warfare like jazz machinians approach music. Structured improvisation that sounds like chaos, but achieves harmony through mastery. Experiencing harmony only through mastery. General Thexavar looked at this assessment and realized that his military career had just encountered something that treated military careers as optional equipment rather than professional necessity. Send a message to all Imperium forces, he said quietly. Humans are not to be engaged in military conflict under any circumstances. What reason should I give? They fight like reality is negotiable. In the depths of space, human ships continued their patrol patterns, flying in formations that spelled out greetings in 47 different languages while maintaining optimal defensive positions, treating the vast cosmos like a neighborhood where everyone was invited to the block party, but maybe shouldn't try to start any trouble. The universe was becoming a more interesting place to live. The communication from Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak arrived at Imperium High Command at 3:47 Standard Galactic Time, transmitted on an emergency frequency reserved for catastrophic military failures and existential crises. The message was brief. Request immediate diplomatic contact with human forces. Current situation classified as tactical impossibility level maximum. Send negotiators, send philosophers, do not send more ships. Admiral Nexus, commander of Imperium High Command, read the message 3 times before activating emergency protocols. In 600 years of galactic military history, no Imperium commander had ever requested philosophers as combat support. Status report, Nexus demanded as his senior staff assembled. Sir, reported Intelligence Director Korth, Supreme Fleet Commander Vorthak has encountered what he describes as military opponents who treat military opposition as a recreational challenge. Meaning, the humans, sir. They appear to view warfare as entertainment. How badly has Vorthak been defeated? Hasn't been defeated, sir. He's requesting tactical withdrawal because he says fighting Humes is like trying to choreograph chaos while the chaos choreographs you back. Director Korth activated the holographic display showing Vortak's fleet status. Every ship was undamaged, every system operational. If his fleet is intact, why is he requesting withdrawal? According to his tactical assessment, sir, the humans could have destroyed his entire force within the first 4 minutes of engagement, but chose not to, because it would have been unsporting. Admiral Nexus stared at the display showing an intact Imperium fleet that had been tactically defeated by opponents who considered total victory to be poor etiquette. Contact Human Command immediately. Arrange ceasefire negotiations. The ceasefire negotiations took place aboard the human vessel Diplomatic Tuesday, which turned out to be a military flagship converted into a conference facility by moving all the weapons to one side and setting up a coffee station where the tactical computers used to be. Admiral Nexus arrived with extensive security protocols and carefully prepared negotiation strategies based on 6 centuries of galactic conflict resolution. The humans greeted them with coffee and welcome cookies. Admiral Nexus, announced Captain Rebecca Williams, extending her hand. Thanks for coming by. Hope you don't mind the casual setup. We figured formal negotiations work better when everyone's comfortable. Captain Williams, we're here to discuss terms for ending military hostilities between our forces. Hostilities? Williams looked genuinely confused. Oh, you mean the training exercise. That was great. Your fleet has excellent formation discipline. Training exercise? Sure. Combat simulation, whatever you want to call it. Your commander Vorthak runs a tight operation. Admiral Nexus felt his prepared negotiation strategy developing fundamental irrelevance. Captain, our forces were engaged in actual combat, were they? Nobody got seriously hurt. Everybody followed the safety protocols, and Vortak's people showed some really creative tactical adaptations. Safety protocols? Standard engagement guidelines. No targeting life support systems, no excessive force against disabled vessels. Basic sportsmanship. Are you saying that human forces deliberately avoided inflicting casualties? Well, yeah. Why would we want to hurt people during a training exercise? But this was military combat. Military training, Williams corrected. Combat implies somebody's actually trying to eliminate somebody else. This was just practice. And your assessment of our tactical doctrine? Williams considered the question thoughtfully. Really solid fundamentals, excellent coordination, but maybe a little predictable? How did you figure out our patterns? Your formations are really elegant, like watching a ballet with starships. But ballet follows choreography, and choreography is predictable. And human tactical doctrine? We don't really do choreography. We're more like jazz musicians. Structured improvisation. Admiral Nexus felt his understanding of military science encountering something that treated science as a starting point rather than absolute authority. What are human terms for ending this conflict? Conflict? Williams looked around the comfortable conference area. Admiral, we're not in conflict. We're in professional consultation. What do you propose for future interactions between our forces? Exchange programs, Williams announced enthusiastically. Send some of your people to train with our people. We'll send some of ours to learn from yours. Everybody benefits. Admiral Nexus looked at his prepared negotiation documents and realized none of them had included provisions for opponents who treated military conflict as educational outreach. We accept, he said quietly. The new galactic military doctrine was published 6 months later under the title Emergency Amendments to Standard Warfare Protocols, the Human Exception. Article 1 established that military engagements involving human forces were to be classified as educational opportunities rather than combat operations. Article 2 required all military academies to include courses in tactical creativity and strategic improvisation. Article 3 mandated that traditional tactical doctrine be taught alongside alternative approaches to military problem solving. Article 4 simply stated, when in doubt, try something unprecedented. Professor Kythan, now Director of Human Tactical Studies at War College Nexus Prime, stood before a new class of military cadets and opened his lecture with a question that would have horrified his former self. Who can tell me why perfect tactics are imperfect? Cadet Niren raised a tentacle. Because perfect tactics assume your opponent will behave perfectly predictably? Exactly. Computer, display human military philosophy, Lesson 1. The holographic display showed, perfect is the enemy of effective. Professor, asked Cadet ZX, how do you train for imperfection? By accepting that your training is insufficient for the situations you'll actually encounter. Sounds like chaos. Organize chaos, Professor Kythan corrected. The humans have shown us that chaos, properly organized, becomes a tactical advantage. Professor, Cadet Voss asked carefully, are you saying that human forces are superior to traditional military doctrine? I'm saying that human forces have discovered something important. Effectiveness matters more than elegance. But surely military science. Military science is a tool, Kythan interrupted. Humans use it as a tool. We were using it as a religion. Professor, what's the most important lesson we can learn from human tactical doctrine? Professor Kythan considered the question, thinking about his transformation from someone who mocked human military incompetence to someone who taught tactical creativity. Military doctrine should serve military effectiveness, not the other way around, meaning that if your doctrine prevents you from winning, your doctrine is wrong. The class absorbed this with thoughtful silence that indicated fundamental assumptions being revised. Professor, Cadet Zeke asked, will we be able to fight like humans after taking this course? No, Kythan replied with a smile. But you'll be able to think like humans. And that's almost as dangerous. As Professor Kythan dismissed his class, he noticed something that would have horrified his former self. The cadets didn't file out in perfect formation. Instead, they clustered in small groups, gesturing enthusiastically as they debated the tactical applications of organized chaos. Professor, Cadet Niren called back from the doorway, for our final project, are we allowed to design tactics that don't exist yet? Kythan smiled with the expression of an educator watching students surpass their teacher's expectations. Cadet, if your tactics already exist, you're not thinking creatively enough. 3 months later, the War College received its first complaint from the Galactic Military Standards Board. Apparently, Kythan's students had submitted tactical simulations that made the evaluation computers file formal requests for psychiatric counseling. The complaint concluded with a simple statement. Human military philosophy is contagious. Recommend immediate quarantine procedures for all educational institutions. Professor Kythan framed the complaint and hung it on his office wall, right next to a handwritten note from Captain Williams that read, "Thanks for keeping an open mind. The universe needs more teachers who aren't afraid to learn. P.S. Your students are getting scary good at this chaos thing." In the depths of space, a new generation of Imperium officers conducted their first independent patrol, flying in formations that maintained perfect tactical positioning, while spelling out, "Learning is fun" in ancient galactic script. The universe was no longer just an interesting place to live. It was becoming an interesting place to think.